What happens when a former royal sits down for what should be a routine chat show appearance, only to find herself facing the most brutally honest panelist on British television? What unfolds is a clash so explosive that it ends with security being called and a guest being escorted from the studio. This is the story of how Meghan Markle's appearance on Loose Women turned into television chaos. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about celebrity interviews gone wrong. Trust me, you're going to want to hear every word of what happened next. The ITV studios were buzzing with anticipation. Loose Women had secured one of the biggest guests of the year, and the production team knew they were sitting on television gold. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, had agreed to appear on the show to discuss her latest charitable endeavors and her new life. What nobody expected was how quickly the conversation would spiral completely out of control. As the cameras rolled, and the familiar Loose Women theme music faded, presenter Ruth Langsford smiled warmly at the camera. Welcome back to Loose Women. We're absolutely thrilled to have with us today Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. Meghan, thank you so much for joining us. Meghan, impeccably dressed in a cream blazer, smiled graciously. Thank you for having me, Ruth. It's wonderful to be here. The opening minutes went smoothly. Ruth guided the conversation through safe territory, discussing Meghan's charitable work and her passion for women's empowerment. The audience seemed engaged, and Meghan appeared, relaxed, offering thoughtful responses about her foundation work and upcoming projects. But then Ruth turned to the panel. Let's bring in our panelists. We have Denise Welch with us today, along with Kay Adams and Janet Streetporter. Denise, you've been quite vocal about your thoughts on the royal family recently. What would you like to ask Meghan? Denise Welch, known for her unfiltered approach and willingness to ask the questions others wouldn't dare, leaned forward slightly. Her expression was serious, almost calculating. Meghan, I have to ask, and I think our viewers deserve honesty here, you've spoken extensively about your mental health struggles within the royal family, which obviously we all sympathize with. But there seems to be a pattern where institutions you've been part of, whether it's the royal family or previous workplaces, somehow become portrayed as toxic environments. Do you ever consider that perhaps the common denominator might be worth examining? The studio fell silent. You could practically hear the collective intake of breath from the audience. Meghan's smile faltered for just a moment before she composed herself. I'm sorry, Denise, but I think that's quite unfair. When multiple people come forward about systemic issues within an institution, it's important to listen to those voices rather than questioning the integrity of the individuals speaking out. Denise wasn't backing down, but that's exactly my point, isn't it? Multiple people have also spoken positively about working within these same institutions. Your sister-in-law Catherine seems to thrive in the royal environment. Many of your former colleagues from Suits have remained silent about these alleged workplace issues. I'm just wondering if you've ever considered that perhaps the issue isn't always external. Meghan's posture stiffened visibly. Denise, I think you're making some very dangerous assumptions here. Just because someone chooses not to speak publicly about their experiences doesn't mean those experiences don't exist. And comparing my situation to Catherine's is completely inappropriate. Our circumstances were entirely different. Were they, though? Denise pressed on, her voice calm but pointed. You both married into the same family, under similar scrutiny. The difference seems to be in how you each chose to handle that pressure. Catherine found ways to work within the system, while you chose to publicly criticize it. I'm not saying either approach is wrong, but surely you can see how some people might question the narrative. Ruth Langsford looked increasingly uncomfortable, glancing between her guest and panelist. Perhaps we should move on to, she began, but Meghan cut her off. No, Ruth. I think this is exactly the kind of conversation we need to have. Denise, what you're suggesting is victim blaming, plain and simple. You're essentially saying that because I spoke out about racism and mental health struggles, I'm somehow the problem. That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps these toxic systems in place. Denise shook her head firmly. That's not what I'm saying at all, and I think you know that. I'm talking about accountability. Yes, you faced challenges, and yes, some of those may have been due to unconscious bias or institutional failures. But you've also made some very public statements that have been disputed by other family members. You've painted yourself as the sole victim in situations where there might be multiple perspectives. The tension in the studio was palpable. Kay Adams and Janet Streetporter sat in stunned silence, clearly not expecting the conversation to take this turn. Meghan's media training was being put to the ultimate test as she struggled to maintain her composure. Denise, I have to say, I'm quite shocked by this line of questioning. I came here today to talk about positive change and charitable work, not to be ambushed with accusations. The idea that I'm somehow responsible for the institutional problems I encountered is not only wrong, it's harmful to anyone who's ever tried to speak truth to power. But Denise was relentless. I'm not ambushing you, Meghan. I'm asking the questions that many of our viewers are thinking. You've had unprecedented platforms to share your story, from Oprah to Netflix to multiple interviews. You've controlled the narrative completely. But narrative control isn't the same as truth, is it? And when people who are actually there, who witnessed these events provide different accounts, shouldn't we at least consider that there might be more to the story? Meghan's voice began to rise slightly, her carefully maintained composure starting to crack. The people who were there, Denise, were part of the system that was failing me. Of course, they're going to protect that system. That's exactly how these power structures maintain themselves, by discrediting anyone who dares to challenge them. Or, Denise countered, her voice remaining frustratingly calm, maybe some of those people are telling the truth. Maybe the palace staff who said they felt bullied were actually telling the truth. Maybe the family members who felt blindsided by public accusations had legitimate grievances. Maybe, just maybe, the situation was more complex than the black and white narrative you've presented. The word bullying hit like a bomb. Meghan's face flushed, and for the first time, her voice carried a sharp edge. How dare you bring up those discredited allegations? Those were investigated and found to be without merit. You're repeating tabloid gossip and presenting it as fact. Denise leaned back slightly, a knowing look in her eyes. Were they found to be without merit, though? Or were the results of that investigation simply never made public? There's a difference, isn't there? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Meghan's eyes flashed with something that looked dangerously close to panic, mixed with rage. Ruth Langsford made another attempt to steer the conversation away from the precipice it was rapidly approaching. Ladies, perhaps we could focus on some of the positive work Meghan is doing with her foundation. Ruth suggested desperately, but both women ignored her completely. Meghan's voice took on a tone that was both controlled and threatening. Denise, I think you need to be very careful about what you're implying here. Those investigations were handled appropriately, and I won't sit here and allow you to perpetuate harmful rumors that have been used to attack me for years. But Denise seemed energized by Meghan's obvious discomfort. I'm not implying anything, Meghan. I'm asking direct questions. If the investigation cleared you completely, why not release? The findings, transparency, would surely put all these rumors to bed once and for all. Unless, of course, the findings weren't as favorable as you'd like people to believe. Because Meghan snapped, her composure finally beginning to crack visibly. Some things are kept private to protect all parties involved. But your suggestion, that I somehow escaped accountability, is both insulting and completely wrong. Denise tilted her head slightly, like a predator sensing weakness. Protected all parties, or protected you? Because, from what I understand, the staff members who made those complaints didn't feel particularly protected. Some of them left their positions entirely. That doesn't sound like a win-win resolution to me. Meghan's hands clenched slightly. In her lap, staff turnover happens in every organization. Denise, you're connecting dots that don't exist and creating a narrative that serves your agenda, not the truth. My agenda. Denise laughed, but there was no humor in it. Meghan, I don't have an agenda here. I'm simply asking the questions that responsible journalists should be asking. You've spent years controlling your narrative through friendly interviews and carefully managed media appearances. Someone needs to ask the hard questions. Hard questions. Meghan's voice was rising now, and the cameras were capturing every micro-expression of frustration and anger. These aren't hard questions, Denise. This is a character assassination disguised as journalism. You're sitting here attacking me based on unsubstantiated rumors and gossip. Kay Adams finally found her voice, attempting to mediate. Perhaps we could all take a step back here. This is getting quite heated, and I think we're losing sight of why Meghan came on the show today. But Denise was far from finished. Actually, Kay, I think this is exactly why these conversations matter. Meghan has built her entire post-royal brand on being the victim of an unfair system. But what if that's not the complete truth? What if there were legitimate concerns about her behavior that she's simply choosing to reframe as persecution? Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. The sudden movement caught everyone off guard. I will not sit here and be attacked like this. This is exactly the kind of treatment that drove me away from the United Kingdom in the first place. You're proving my point about the toxic media environment here. Sit down, Meghan, Denise said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. Running away when faced with difficult questions is exactly the pattern I'm talking about. You can't control this narrative the way you control your Netflix interviews or your podcast appearances. Sometimes you have to face uncomfortable truths. Meghan remained standing, her face flushed with anger. Uncomfortable truths? The uncomfortable truth is that you're a bitter woman who's built her career on tearing down other women. You're everything that's wrong with British media. Everything that's toxic about this country's treatment of women who dare to speak up. The personal attacks seemed to energize Denise, rather than offend her. She leaned forward in her chair, her eyes sharp and focused. There it is. When you can't answer the questions, you attack the questioner. That's your pattern, isn't it, Meghan? Anyone who challenges your version of events becomes the villain in your story. My version of events? Meghan's voice was shaking now with barely controlled fury. My version includes documented evidence of racist coverage, mental health struggles. That nearly drove me to suicide, and a family that refused to protect me or my child. But sure, Denise, let's pretend that's all just my imagination. Denise stood up as well, matching Meghan's energy. Nobody's dismissing your mental health struggles, and nobody's saying the media coverage was always fair. But you can't use those real issues as a shield against any and all criticism. You can't weaponize your pain to avoid accountability for your own actions. Weaponize my pain. Meghan's voice cracked slightly on the words. How dare you minimize what I went through? You have no idea what it's like to be trapped in a system that's designed to break you down. To have your every move scrutinized and criticized by people like you who have never walked in my shoes. Ruth Langsford was frantically gesturing to her producers off camera, clearly desperate for guidance on how to handle the situation that had spiraled completely out of control. Janet Streetporter sat frozen, her mouth slightly open in shock at what she was witnessing. Denise's voice remained maddeningly calm compared to Meghan's increasingly emotional responses. You're right. I don't know what it's like to be in your specific situation, but I do know what it's like to be held accountable for my actions, and I know what it's like to face criticism without running away or claiming victory. That's called being an adult in the public eye. Running away. Meghan's voice rose to near shouting levels. I didn't run away. I removed myself and my family from a toxic situation to protect our well-being. That's called self-preservation. Not running away. But I suppose someone like you wouldn't understand the difference between strategic retreat and cowardice. The insult hit its mark. For the first time, Denise's composure slipped slightly, her jaw tightening. Someone like me. And what exactly does that mean, Meghan? Please, enlighten us all about what kind of person you think I am. Meghan seemed to realize she'd crossed a line, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. You're the kind of person who builds a career on negativity, on tearing others down instead of building anything positive. You're a professional cynic who mistakes cruelty for honesty and bullying for brave journalism. The studio audience, which had been silent throughout most of the exchange, began to murmur among themselves. Some seemed shocked by Meghan's outburst, while others appeared to be enjoying the drama unfolding before them. Denise laughed, but it was a sharp, cutting sound. Professional cynic. Meghan, I've been in this industry longer than you've been famous. I've interviewed everyone from politicians to pop stars, and I've never had someone react quite like this to basic accountability questions. Most public figures understand that tough questions come with the territory. Tough questions, Meghan? Gestured wildly, her polished exterior completely abandoned now. These aren't tough questions. This is an ambush designed to humiliate me on national television. You invited me here under false pretenses, just so you could attack me with tabloid gossip and conspiracy theories. Ruth finally found her voice again, though it was shaky. Perhaps we should take a commercial break and let everyone collect themselves. But Denise shook her head. No, Ruth. I think Meghan should answer the question. If this is all tabloid, gossip, and conspiracy theories, then surely she can provide some clarity. Why not address these concerns head-on, instead of deflecting and attacking? Meghan pointed directly at Denise, her finger trembling with rage. Because I don't owe you or anyone else explanations for every malicious rumor that gets spread about. Me? I've shared my truth, and if you choose not to believe it, that says more about you than it does about me. Your truth. Denise seized on the phrase immediately. That's interesting phrasing. Not the truth, but your truth. That suggests there might be other truths out there, doesn't it? Other perspectives that might be equally valid. The phrase hung in the air like a lit fuse. Meghan's face went through a series of expressions, from shock to fury to something that looked almost desperate. The carefully constructed public persona that had carried her through countless interviews was completely shattered now. There is only one truth, Denise, Meghan said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Is my truth. The truth of someone who lived through racism, isolation, and institutional gaslighting. Your suggestion that there are other equally valid truths is exactly the kind of thinking that allows these systems to continue harming people. Denise stepped closer, the space between them crackling with tension. But that's exactly the problem, isn't it? You've decided that your perspective is the only valid one. Anyone who disagrees with your version of events is automatically wrong, racist, or part of some conspiracy against you. That's not how reality works, Meghan. Reality. Meghan's laugh was bitter and harsh. The reality is that I'm sitting here, being interrogated by someone who's clearly made up her mind about me before I even walked through that door. The reality is that this is exactly the kind of hostile environment that I was trying to escape. Ruth Langsford was gesturing frantically to her production team, mouthing cut to commercial, but the cameras kept rolling. The producers knew they were witnessing television gold, even if it was completely spiraling out of control. Denise wasn't backing down an inch. If asking basic questions about accountability creates a hostile environment for you, then maybe public life isn't the right fit. Most people in the public eye understand that their actions and statements will be scrutinized. That's the price of the platform you've chosen to use. Chosen to use. Meghan's voice cracked with indignation.